I've always hated being home alone. My name is Stefan, and I'm 12 years old. My little sister Sam is 10. Last Tuesday, we had to stay home because we were both sick. Mom had to go to work, and our stepdad Steve promised to check on us later. It was a rainy, cold day that makes you feel worse if you're already sick. Sam and I were lying on the couch in the living room. We were wrapped in blankets, watching cartoons. Our dog Max lay at our feet, snoring softly. The house was quiet except for the TV. Mom had left us some soup and crackers in the kitchen. She always ensures we're okay, even when she's not here. Around noon, I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't just because I was sick. There was this strange feeling like someone was watching us. I shook it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. But then I heard it, the sound of the front door opening. I turned to Sam, who was looking at me with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. We both knew it couldn't be Steve. He always called before he came home early. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mom's number. She answered on the second ring. "Mom, is Steve supposed to be home?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "No, honey, he's still at work." "Why?" she replied, sounding worried. I felt a chill run down my spine. "I think someone's in the house," I said, my voice shaking now. "Lock yourselves in the basement. I'll call Steve and the police," Mom said urgently. I grabbed Sam's hand, and we ran to the basement door. Max started barking loudly, his barks echoing through the house. We rushed down the stairs, locking the door behind us. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old boxes and forgotten toys. We found a corner behind a stack of boxes and huddled together, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Max's barking grew louder, and we heard footsteps moving around upstairs. They were slow and deliberate, like someone was searching for something. I held Sam close, trying to comfort her, but I was just as scared as she was. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could hear Sam's rapid breathing. It felt like hours passed as we sat in the dark basement. The footsteps continued to move around the house, sometimes stopping, getting closer. I kept checking my phone, waiting for any sign that help was coming. Finally, we heard the sound of the front door opening again, followed by Steve's voice calling out for us. I felt a wave of relief. We stayed hidden until we heard him calling our names. "Stefan, it's Steve. Where are you?" I unlocked the basement door and peeked out. Steve was standing in the hallway, looking around. His face was pale, and he was holding a baseball bat. We rushed out and ran to him, hugging him tightly. "It's okay, kids. The police are on their way," he said, trying to reassure us. "Stay behind me." We followed him as he carefully searched the house. Max was still barking, standing at the entrance to the basement. Steve slowly opened the door and called out, "Is anyone down there?" There was no response. He started to go down the stairs, and we followed at a safe distance. The basement was just as we had left it, dark and cluttered. Steve moved slowly, checking behind boxes and old furniture. Suddenly, Max started growling, his fur standing on end. Steve pointed the bat towards the back corner of the basement. There, crouched behind a pile of boxes, was a man. He was thin, with dirty clothes and wild eyes. He looked terrified, but so were we. "Stay where you are. The police are coming!" Steve shouted, his voice firm. The man didn't move. He just stared at us, his eyes wide and desperate. We backed away, and within minutes, we heard the sound of police sirens outside. Officers stormed into the house and quickly took the man into custody. He didn't resist, just let them handcuff him and lead him away. The police searched the basement thoroughly and found nothing else. They questioned us about what had happened, and we told them everything. Steve stayed with us the whole time, making sure we were safe. After the police left, Mom came home and she hugged us both tightly. "You did the right thing, calling me and hiding," she said, tears in her eyes. We never found out what the man wanted or why he was in our house. The police said he was probably a drifter, someone looking for a place to hide or maybe steal something. But the not knowing made it even scarier. Before we get into the next story, if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. Last Friday night was supposed to be a regular evening. My parents had a dinner party to go to, so they hired a babysitter to watch over me. Her name was Emma, and she was a teenager from down the street. I liked Emma because she was nice and always brought fun games and snacks. That night, we had planned to watch a movie and eat popcorn. It was around 7 p.m. when my parents left. They reminded Emma about the emergency numbers and kissed me goodbye. The house felt quiet after they walked out the door. Emma and I settled in the living room, and she put on my favorite cartoon. About an hour later, there was a knock on the door. I was excited, thinking maybe my parents had forgotten something or brought me a treat. Emma told me to stay on the couch while she checked who it was. I heard her ask, "Who is it?" "We're from Tony's Pizza." "We have your order," a deep voice replied. I was confused. "We didn't order pizza." Emma opened the door just a crack and peeked outside. Two men stood on the porch, both wearing baseball caps pulled low over their eyes. One of them held a large pizza box. Emma frowned. "I think you have the wrong house. We didn't order any pizza." The man with the pizza box insisted, "This is the address we were given. Someone must have called." Emma hesitated. I could tell she was getting worried. She didn't open the door any wider. "What name is on the order?" The men looked at each other, then back at Emma. We didn't get a name, just the address." That didn't make sense. Emma's face turned serious. "I'm gonna call the pizza place to confirm. Give me a second." She shut the door and quickly locked it. I watched her as she grabbed her phone and pretended to dial. She spoke loudly, "Hi, Tony's Pizza. I want to confirm an order for delivery. Yeah, the address is 123 Maple Street." There was a pause, and Emma looked at me, her eyes wide with worry. I knew she wasn't talking to anyone. She was pretending to make the call. The men outside the door must have realized this too. They started to argue, saying things like, "We need to leave the pizza here, and just open the door." Their voices grew louder and angrier. I felt my heart race. Something was wrong. Emma held up her phone and said loudly, "If you don't leave, I'm calling 911 right now." She pressed some buttons to make it look real. "The police are on their way." The men suddenly went silent. There was a tense moment before I heard their footsteps quickly moving away from the door. Emma waited a few seconds, then peeked through the window. She watched them get into a van and drive off. Emma locked all the doors and windows and made sure everything was secure. She sat down next to me, and I could see she was trying to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. "It's okay," she said softly. "They're gone now." I nodded, but I was still scared. "Who were they?" Emma shook her head. "I don't know, but they weren't pizza delivery men. They were trying to trick us." We decided to stay in the living room and keep the lights on. Emma called my parents to tell them what happened. They were really worried and said they would come home right away. Emma also called the real Tony's Pizza to ask if anyone had placed an order from our address. They confirmed that no order was made. While we waited for my parents, Emma and I tried to distract ourselves by playing games on her phone. But every little noise made us jump. We kept glancing at the door, half expecting the men to come back. When my parents finally arrived, they hugged me tight and thanked Emma for being so brave and smart. My dad called the police to report what happened. The police came and asked us a lot of questions. They said we did the right thing by not opening the door and pretending to call for help. That night, I slept in my parents' room. I couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if Emma hadn't been so careful. The next day, my parents installed a new security system with cameras. They wanted to make sure we were safe. Emma was a hero that night. She kept me safe and calm, even when she was scared herself. I learned that it's important to be cautious and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And sometimes the best thing you can do is pretend to be brave until help arrives. From that night on, I was more aware of the dangers around us. But I also knew that with people like Emma looking out for me, I was in good hands. We never found out who those men were or what they wanted, but they never came back. Living in a downtown loft next to bars can be exciting, but it also has its scary moments. On most nights, I would hear loud music and people laughing or arguing as they left the bars. Sometimes I worried that drunk strangers might stumble into my home by mistake. My loft was on the ground floor, and though the building was secure, the constant noise made me nervous. One Friday night, I was alone at home. It was a typical evening with the usual loud noises coming from the street. I had a long day and felt exhausted, so I decided to go to bed early. I climbed into my warm bed, hoping for a good night's sleep. But around midnight, I woke up to something unusual. I heard eerie voices and faint violin music coming from my living room. My heart started to race. I lay still in bed, trying to convince myself it was just a dream, or maybe some noise from outside. But the sounds continued, growing louder and more disturbing. I could hear whispers as if people were having a conversation in a language I couldn't understand. The violin played a haunting tune that sent chills down my spine. Terrified, I decided to hide. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could and crept into my closet. I closed the door behind me and sat in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest. I held my breath, straining to hear any clues that might tell me what was happening. The voices and music echoed through the loft, making it sound like there were intruders inside. After what felt like an eternity, the noises stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was almost as frightening as the sounds themselves. I waited for a few more minutes, unsure if it was safe to come out. Finally, I gathered my courage and slowly opened the closet door. I tiptoed toward the living room, my hands shaking. When I reached the living room, it was empty. There was no sign of anyone being there. I checked the front door, and it was still locked. I was puzzled and scared. What could have caused those noises? As I stood in the middle of the living room, trying to make sense of it all, I heard a faint clicking sound coming from my sound system. I walked over to it and noticed the light was on. That was strange because I hadn't used it that evening. I turned it off and back on, hoping it was just a glitch. Then I heard a knock on my door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could be visiting at this hour? I cautiously approached the door and looked through the peephole. To my surprise, it was my neighbor from the loft next door, a man named Mark. He looked concerned and a bit embarrassed. I opened the door slightly, still wary. "Hey Mark, is everything okay?" I asked. "Hey, I'm so sorry to bother you," Mark said, scratching the back of his head. "I think I might have accidentally connected to your sound system." I stared at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" Mark explained. "I'm editing a horror film for a project. I have this new wireless speaker system, and it seems like it picked up your speakers instead of mine. I've been playing around with some sound effects and music for hours, and I didn't realize it was going through your speakers." Relief flooded over me as I realized there were no intruders, just a technical mistake. I couldn't help but laugh, though my hands were still shaking. "That explains a lot," I said. "I thought I was going crazy or that someone had broken in." Mark apologized again and promised to fix his system so it wouldn't happen again. We chatted for a few minutes, and he shared some stories about his film project. He was working on a scene that involved eerie voices and haunting violin music, which explained the terrifying sounds I heard. After Mark left, I made myself a cup of tea to calm my nerves. I couldn't believe how scared I had been, hiding in my closet over a simple mix-up. As I sipped my tea, I looked around my cozy loft and felt a sense of gratitude. Living downtown had its challenges, but it also brought unexpected moments of connection and understanding.